Hey folks, so this is Thomas Pilnick coming at you live from my studio in Kirby Mills. I'm excited to share a bit of my practice with you today and teach you the basics of concrete. So this video today is going to be step one, which is mixing and then casting concrete into an everyday object. This is a huge part of what I do. I'm really excited to share it with you, and I hope it inspires some love for mold making or creating or casting or concrete. There will be follow-up videos in terms of finishing concrete, how to let it cure, the science behind it, how to go big, how to go small, etc. And I'm excited to share that with you too. But today, all we're going to be doing is mixing a batch of concrete to perfection, of course, and then casting it into an object. So taking your liquid concrete that you've mixed and then pouring it into whatever you like. And we'll talk about different materials, how concrete bonds or doesn't bond to that. I've definitely made my fair share of mistakes. And then from there, we can talk a little bit about what happens next. So first of all, I'd like to take you through the materials that we're going to need today to go through this with me. And you can either slow this video down or just pause when you need to. And then on Husky CT, I'm also going to be posting the materials list and a small step-by-step guide to go in tandem with this video in case you miss something. I also recommend kind of just Googling around, doing your own research. Concrete is a really, really versatile material. It can be used for almost anything, and it's just a lot of fun. So definitely recommend doing that, and then checking out other artists. One that I particularly like who works with concrete is Rachel White-Reed. She's been a huge inspiration for me, especially given that she is a British female artist. And she's gone on to great success just through casting everyday objects in concrete. So without further ado, let's get started with the materials. So what you'll need, obviously, is concrete. I'm going to tilt my video here. So I like to use Quikrete high strength concrete mix, a 60-pound bag, which gets you pretty far. Goes for about $3.75 at Home Depot or Lowe's right now. So it's really an accessible material, and this produces 60 pounds of concrete. So it's a fair amount or a little over when you mix it with water. Concrete is aggregate. It's cement and sand and stone. So I'm not going to hold on to it too much because it is very alkaline, and so it will irritate your skin, and we'll talk about other materials you need in a second. So you need a cup or a scoop or whatever to grab your concrete with here. And I put this all in just a big kind of bucket, which you're supposed to mix concrete in, but I do it slightly different. The second thing you need is another bucket to actually mix the concrete in when you add water to the mixture. And then I keep with me just a handy pitcher of water. We will definitely not be using this much. As you'll see, concrete actually doesn't need that much water to get it to the right consistency, but it's helpful to have because you can always add more and you can't take some away. So it's just helpful to go with the concrete base, with the dry concrete, and then add water to it as you go and keep mixing. And then I have a trowel here, my trusty trowel that I need to wash. Keep your tools clean, it'll help you in the long run. But these are, $5 to $10 at the store, so again, pretty easy and accessible. And we'll talk about other tools that you might need, such as floats and finishers later on in a different video or tutorial, depending on if we're in person or not. But the trowel is what you're going to need today to start us off. So with all that, I also recommend a respirator, which I'm not going to be using today just for the sake of clarity. Concrete does tend to kick up a lot of dust, but because this is a really small project, I'm not overly concerned, and I'd rather be able to communicate with you. But what I do think is a must are a pair of gloves. Again, as I said, concrete is highly alkaline. If it starts to cure, which is the word we use for setting or drying, concrete doesn't technically dry, it cures, which means it gets harder over time. But as it cures, that can start to really irritate your skin. So I highly recommend a pair of gloves, and then closed-toe shoes, and then long pants or whatever if you're concerned about that, or if you just want to stay clean. I also recommend, I'm in my studio so I can get it messy, but I recommend a plastic tarp or something, or if you're working outside, that's great, just to keep everything tidy and clean and neat so that you're not spending hours cleaning up, or so the concrete doesn't bond to anything. And then the last thing you're going to need is whatever it is you want to cast into. So I have this very luxurious Smeg container immersion blender that we're going to be casting into, because it's got this beautiful 3-part foam mold ready for me to just create something. And you know, I love just occupying the empty space and seeing what happens, because obviously I'm not going to get an immersion blender, and I'm going to lose the idea of an immersion blender while still potentially capturing some of its form and shape and meaning and history. So that's why I do what I do here, and that's why I love it, and that's why I love what concrete can do for me, because it picks up all these little details, and all its its imperfections and flaws really give something to me. So why don't we begin with mixing the concrete. So I'm going to put my gloves on. And you can join me in this, or you can watch the video first and kind of do your own research and do this in your own time. But I'm kind of trying to keep this video under 10 minutes, and you can see just how easy of a process this really is. So I've got my bucket to mix the concrete in, and I'm going to lower my camera a little bit just so you can see what I'm doing with my hands. So I'm going to scoop kind of 2, and you can see the dust already, so I'm trying to sort of stay back a little bit, but it's not too bad with such a small project. So I'm going to scoop 2 or 3 scoops of my concrete in. And I it's a really inexact science. I know the pack probably says mix X parts to X part concrete, and honestly, like, it just depends on the project, the size of the thing, and you're kind of just feel it out. Concrete has a mind of its own sometimes, and that's what I love about it. And you can go off the box or off the pack if you want, but the results will differ depending on how thick or how watery you end up doing it. But now that I have 2 or 3 scoops in, I'm going to pour some water, I mean. So I poured, a small pour that was a couple of seconds. It's probably about a cup of water, and you can see it already kind of bubbling in there. And I'm just going to take my trowel and mix it up. Okay, so you see it's a super, super liquidy thing right now, which is not what you want, but I do it this way because then it's easier to add more concrete and not have just concrete at the bottom and water at the top and having to exert a ton of energy mixing it all up. So I'm going to add 1 more scoop, and I'm going to mix it up, and I'm going to continue on this until I've got it at a kind of nice consistency where I can reach my hand in and clump it up, and the clump kind of holds and doesn't break apart, but it's not too solid, and there are no dry sandy bits like you see here. The dark stuff is wet and the light stuff is dry. You want it all kind of a dark gray. So as you can see, you've got this kind of dark gray mix in here. It's got kind of a nice chunky oats consistency to it. If I pulled it out and squeeze it, it holds together, but I can still see some surface water on it, which is really nice for me. So I like it a little liquidy, and you can see if I shake the bucket, it doesn't really move around too much, but it's still got some nice liquid property to it, and that's where I like to stop. This isn't going to be enough for my full cast, I don't think, but what I'm going to do is just pour it in to show you how to do that and how to sort of let it cure, and then in another video we can sort of go further into detail about how to move on to the next step. But a lot of it is just waiting. So I have my mix and I have my form, which is what we call the mold that you're casting into. It's a form. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to pour my bucket in, sort of imprecisely, using my hands because I have gloves, which is great. And I'm going to take my trowel to loosen things up. So there's a little bit of labor involved here, but it's a labor of love. Oh, this might actually be enough. So, it's hard to estimate between volumes, so you can always be more or less precise about it, but if I have leftovers, I'll tend to find just another thing I can pour it in, or, just throw out any remainders. But actually, I think I ended up creating the perfect amount. So you see, as I'm pouring this in, I'm pressing down a little bit just to make sure that it's getting in the cracks and crevices of my form. And I'm just going to get the last little bits in here. Alright, so my bucket is empty, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to take my trowel, and I'm just going to start smoothing things out. So I didn't want to get to the top of the box, so this is actually perfect for me because I don't want anything to overflow. And this form is made out of foam and cardboard, so sometimes I'll use a release agent, so an oil that I'll spray into the form so that the concrete comes out easier. But with the mix of porous ingredients here in my form, I'm just going to let things happen and see how the concrete responds to the material of the form. I think that's what I like. I like the conversation that's happening between materials. So play it by ear, but if you do want a release agent so that it's kind of a really smooth thing that comes out at the end, I recommend like a spray, vegetable spray that you can just find at Ralph's or whatever, and spraying that on consistently, and then pouring your concrete into the form. So we've got the start of a smooth form. Let me hold that up for you. So you can see it's got some edges, but the general platform is smooth, and you can see water starting to lift to the surface, and that's perfect. So what you want to do is just give it a little shake, a little vibration. Professionals generally use tools for this, but just give it a shake, and what that does is let the aggregate settle to the top a little bit, and then let the concrete that's now liquefied hit the bottom of the form and fill in all the cracks and crevices so that you get a nice smooth object. Okay, so I put it down. I'm going to give the trowel one last press and pass. And everyone has different techniques for this. Everyone has different tools. You can get really fancy with your equipment, but this is the artist's way. Okay. So I am happy with where that is. Again, here you go. You can see it, and I don't have any issue pouring it because it's in its form. But you can see the kind of sheen that's on that. And that's where you want to leave it for, a few hours, if not overnight. And then in another video, we will talk curing. But that is it for today. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. And remember, on Husky CT, I'm going to put a materials list and then a step-by-step guide that goes in tandem with this video in case you missed anything or anything was a little unclear. That was really quick, but you can see how easy this process is, and you'll end up casting a really, really beautiful object. So again, this is Tom Pilnick heading out from my studio in Kirby Mill, and I'll see you in class soon. Bye.